There is a plant so ordinary, so overlooked, that you can buy it at most garden centers for under $2. And for decades, old order Amish women in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania have been using it in a way that most of us have never heard of, not as a tea, not as a salad green, as a skin treatment. One that, according to what I found when I started digging into this, works on the mechanisms that Botox only pretends to address. I want you to stay with me through this because what I found is not just interesting, it changes the way you look at everything sitting on your bathroom shelf right now. If you have been following this channel for a while, you already know what we do here. We go into these communities, we listen, we document. If you are new, consider subscribing now because this is the kind of content that does not show up anywhere else. Let me start with the date, 1937. That is the year the United States saw the first widespread commercial launch of synthetic skincare emulsions, products built around petroleum-derived ingredients that were cheap to manufacture and shelf-stable for years. The timing matters because 1937 is also, not coincidentally, the year that small-scale cultivation of certain medicinal and cosmetic herbs began quietly disappearing from American home gardens. Not because women stopped wanting them, because they stopped being told they needed them. The old order Amish communities in Lancaster County and Holmes County, Ohio never made that turn. They did not switch. They do not follow commercial trends in the same way the rest of us do, and that is precisely why what they preserved is so valuable. The methods I am sharing in this video are inspired by traditional practices of those communities, specifically the women who have managed households, raised large families, and maintained their skin without access to department store counters or prescription retinoids. So, what is this $2 plant? Comfrey, Symphytum officinale if you want the Latin. A perennial herb with broad, slightly rough leaves and small bell-shaped flowers that grows in almost any soil, comes back year after year, and costs almost nothing. You may have seen it at a farmer's market or a heritage seed catalog and walked right past it. Most people do. What Amish women in Lancaster County have used for generations is not the comfrey capsule you find at a health food store. It is the leaf, specifically a preparation made from the fresh or dried leaf that is applied topically. And the reason it does what it does comes down to one compound, allantoin. Allantoin is a naturally occurring molecule found in comfrey root and leaf. It promotes cell proliferation, meaning it signals the skin to regenerate and replace old damaged tissue. It also has a well-documented anti-inflammatory effect, which matters more than most people realize when we are talking about aging skin. Chronic low-grade inflammation, what researchers now call inflammaging, is one of the primary drivers of skin laxity, the kind of slow loosening that no cream on the market fully addresses. Allantoin works against that process at the cellular level, not by numbing it the way Botox numbs a nerve, but by giving the skin what it needs to do its own work. The modern cosmetic industry knows this. Allantoin has been an approved cosmetic ingredient for decades, and you will find it listed on high-end serums that retail for $80 and $90. But in those products, it is almost always synthetic, produced in a lab and present in concentrations far below what the plant itself delivers. The leaf preparation that Amish women have used is whole plant. The allantoin is accompanied by rosmarinic acid, which is a potent antioxidant, and by mucilaginous compounds that hold moisture against the skin in a way that most commercial humectants simply do not replicate. Now, I want to be honest with you about something because I think you deserve that more than you deserve a perfect pitch. Comfrey contains pyrrolizidine alkaloids. You have probably read warnings about this if you have looked Comfrey up online. Those alkaloids, when taken internally in large amounts over long periods, can cause liver damage. That is real. That is documented. Do not drink comfrey tea every day. Do not take comfrey supplements. The oral toxicity concern is legitimate, and I am not going to wave it away. But topical use is a different story. The European Medicines Agency reviewed the evidence and concluded that external use of comfrey preparations on intact skin poses a very low risk, particularly with reasonable intermittent use. The women using this topically in Lancaster County are not applying it daily from birth. They use it seasonally. They are careful. That context matters. I am telling you the limitation because I want you to understand what you are actually working with, not because I want to sell you on something by hiding the edges. Here is where the history gets interesting. In the 1950s and 1960s, a number of small regional American pharmacies, particularly in Pennsylvania and Ohio, still stocked comfrey-based salves alongside their commercial inventory. These were not artisan boutique products. They were functional items that rural households had used for generations and simply continued to purchase. By the mid-1970s, most of those had disappeared from shelves, partly due to the consolidation of pharmacy chains, and partly because the FDA's 1,976 reclassification of cosmetic and drug category products created compliance costs that small manufacturers could not absorb. The industry did not ban comfrey for topical use. They never had to. They just made the regulatory cost of selling it formally high enough that the small producers quit, and the large producers had no incentive to champion a plant they could not patent. By the time the clean beauty wave arrived in the early 2000s, comfrey had been mostly forgotten by the mainstream market, which then turned around and began selling synthetic allantoin at a markup in luxury packaging. That chain of events, from the 1930s through the 1970s, is documented history. I am not asking you to trust a theory. I am asking you to follow a timeline. And then there is the question of what actually happens to the skin. As estrogen levels decline after menopause, the skin loses collagen at an accelerated rate. Researchers estimate a woman loses roughly 30% of her skin collagen in the first 5 years after menopause. The result is not just wrinkles. It is a kind of thinness, a fragility, a look that expensive creams acknowledge on the label and then fail to address in the jar. The reason most of those creams fail is that they are working on the surface. They moisturize, they fill, they temporarily plump. None of that changes what is happening underneath. Allantoin, rosmarinic acid, and the mucilage compounds in a proper comfrey leaf preparation work at a deeper level. The allantoin stimulates fibroblast activity, meaning the cells responsible for producing collagen. The rosmarinic acid reduces the oxidative stress that accelerates collagen breakdown. These are not marketing claims. These are mechanisms that appear in peer-reviewed literature. They are just not being packaged by anyone with a large advertising budget. I spoke not long ago to a woman in Lancaster County. She is 68 years old, retired from teaching, raised 5 children, and has used a comfrey leaf compress on her face and neck every 2 to 3 weeks since she was in her late 40s. She buys the dried leaves from a local Mennonite grower for less than $8 a year. When I asked her what her daughters thought of her skin, she paused and said simply, "They asked me what I use." She did not say it like a boast. She said it like a woman who has long since stopped being surprised. The preparation she described is straightforward. Dried comfrey leaf, steeped in hot water, cooled to a comfortable temperature, and applied as a compress to the face and neck for 15 to 20 minutes. No chemicals, no preservatives, no proprietary anything. What makes this work, she told me, is consistency over time and not expecting it to undo 10 years in a week. That last part is important. This is not a dramatic overnight treatment. 6 to 8 weeks of regular use is typically where women begin to notice a real change in skin texture and firmness. If you are looking for something that delivers visible results in 3 days, this is not that. But if you are willing to work on a timeline that matches how skin actually regenerates, which is slowly and from within, this is the kind of approach that builds on itself. And that is the thing that the modern market cannot sell you, because patience does not move product. There is something worth noticing about the way these Amish communities approach their bodies in general. There is no anti-aging category in their world, no section of the store dedicated to the premise that your face is a problem to be solved. What they have instead is a long tradition of maintenance, of treating the skin the way you would treat a garden, consistently, seasonally, with attention to what it actually needs rather than what the latest advertising cycle has decided it needs. That worldview sounds simple. But it is harder to maintain than it sounds when you have been trained by decades of marketing to believe that the next product is always better than the last one, and that what your grandmother knew is just quaint folklore. It is not folklore. Some of it is chemistry that holds up under scrutiny. The difference is that no one is holding the patent. There are women in Ohio and Pennsylvania who have never owned a bottle of commercial anti-aging serum. Not because they cannot afford one, because they never needed one. That is a sentence worth sitting with for a moment. Now, this channel is built around one premise: that real knowledge about the body, particularly for women in their 50s and beyond, has been systematically sidelined by an industry that profits more from your confusion than from your results. That is not a conspiracy, it is an economic structure, and you are sharp enough to have already noticed it, which is probably why you are here. Drop your state in the comments and tell me what you spend on anti-aging skincare every month. I want to know. And if you have ever had to stop using a product because it irritated your skin or simply stopped working, tell me that too. If your grandmother grew something in her garden that her mother used before her, and you remember it but never knew exactly what it was for, I want to hear that story. That knowledge is worth recovering. If you are the kind of woman who believes that real information has been quietly set aside to protect someone else's bottom line, you already know what to do. Next time, the Amish hair preparation the FDA attempted to classify as a drug-grade product in 1978, which would have effectively removed it from traditional use entirely. The reason that effort failed is a legal story with a paper trail, and it involves an ingredient that is still growing in Holmes County kitchens today.